African Americans in the CCC by James Hanley. The Great Depression was a severe economic downturn that happened in 1929. Prior to the Great Depression, the unemployment rate was only 3%, but by 1933 it had jumped all the way to 25%. 2 million homeless Americans were traveling all across the nation looking for work and living in Hoovervilles. The African American community had been devastated by this depression. Many whites were taking over traditionally black jobs, thus causing the African American unemployment rate to skyrocket to 50%. The election of 1933 brought new hope to a broken nation. Franklin Roosevelt was elected, and within the first 100 days of his presidency, he had implemented the New Deal. The New Deal was a series of economic programs that aimed to pull America out of the Depression and provide relief, recovery, and reform to all Americans. One of the main programs that came out of the New Deal was the Civilian Conservation Corps. The CCC provided 18 to 25-year-old men that were unemployed and unskilled with jobs related to the conservation and development of natural resources on government lands. The CCC was one of the most popular programs that the New Deal provided. Most white Americans had no problems enrolling in the CCC, but many African Americans ran into difficulty signing up. Some of the CCC state directors put quotas and restrictions on the number of blacks that could enroll in the CCC. Most of these directors argued that since African Americans were only 10% of the population, the CCC should only be 10% black. Also, local communities felt uneasy about a group of African Americans being placed in and around their towns. Complaints flooded many CCC state directors' desks, arguing that more blacks in the community would cause crime rates to increase and that women and children would have to live in constant fear. After 1935, CCC Director Robert Fechner had ordered that CCC camps become segregated. Most state directors in the North and the South obeyed this request, but the West had a very small African American population, so for the most part, these camps were integrated. All black camps worked just as well, if not better, than all white camps. In Heflin, Alabama, all black Company 3477 had been praised for their work in fighting fires and the contributions to their local community infrastructure. In Minnesota, Colored Company 1742 had been praised by whites in the community because of the preservation work they had done on the lakes and forests around their town. As I said before, most camps in the West were integrated. Upon arrival, some African Americans claimed to experience some form of racism or resistance, but overall many of them were able to work right alongside their white CCC brothers. Here was one of the CCC camps that worked in the Grand Canyon. John B. Scott, who was the only black man in the camp, was so well respected that he was assigned with the task of monitoring both black and white new enrollees. Also within the camps, many African Americans sought to rise to supervisor positions. However, CCC Director Robert Fechner had posed this idea. Despite Fechner's opposition, a few African Americans did rise to management roles. Frederick Lyman Slade, a black CCC enrollee in Pennsylvania, became the first African American to command an all-black camp. Furthermore, most of the education advisors and medical chaplains were also black at this Pennsylvania camp. After the CCC had ended in 1942, some blacks joined the armed forces and some had joined the workforce. Many of these African American CCC graduates went on to own their own farms, work in agriculture, or got hired into the factories to support the war effort. Many of these black CCC boys attributed their time in the Civilian Conservation Corps as the sole reason why they were able to find work. Luther Wandall, who was a black CCC enrollee at Camp Dix, commented on his experience in the CCC. Quote, "On the whole, I was gratified rather than disappointed with the Civilian Conservation Corps. I had expected the worst. Of course, it reflects, to some extent, all the practices and prejudices of the U.S. Army. But as a job and an experience, for a man that has no work, I can heartily recommend it." End quote. Ernest Bell, who was a former black CCC enrollee, was sent to Florida and found a job in the tractor repair business. Bell immediately became one of the best workers on the job and wrote to his former CCC supervisor thanking him. Although blacks faced barriers both joining the CCC and in the CCC, they were still able to acquire skills that would be useful in the workforce, and many had positive experiences.